has decided to hold interest rates steady. The Fed Reserve Chair making that announcement yesterday. The Fed had raised rates 11 times since March of 2022, and they remain at a 22-year high. However, Dr. Russ Sandefur with Wofford says that there's hope on the horizon. We sat down with him for more. Dr. Sandefur, thank you so much for joining us. To go ahead and jump right into it, when we're talking about the Fed Reserve, they decided to hold interest rates steady. Were you surprised by this move? If so, why or why not?
Hey, Justin, thanks for having me. No, I wasn't surprised by the move, but I think many of us were pleasantly surprised by a lack of hawkishness on the part of the Fed. Really, you got to read more than just the numbers. You got to look at what their statement says and kind of read between the lines sometimes with them. I think officially they're remaining highly attentive to inflation risks. That's a key thing that came out. But unofficially, the fact that they even showed the members' federal funds rate forecast for next year being more in the 4.5 to 4.75 range suggests we're going to have 3/4 point rate cuts next year. And so if you kind of read between the lines, you can see that he's being, Powell and company were a bit more dovish than may have been expected. It does seem that their monetary tightening cycle is coming to an end, but he stopped short of declaring full victory on inflation.
He did. You mentioned reading between the lines. So what did you see in between the lines on what the forecast looks like for next year? And I think a lot of people are worried about inflation as well. So what are you kind of seeing between the lines there when it comes to the forecast on down the road?
Yeah, Justin, the good news is the Fed's dual mandate is keeping unemployment, the unemployment rate low, and then, of course, combating inflation. They've been focused more on the latter, inflation, with these aggressive rate hikes over the last year. The good news is it appears that the Fed has gotten ahead of that problem now and can go back to a more balanced approach, and that inflation appears to be under control now. It's not maybe a little early to declare full victory. There's a couple items that there's a little bit of stickiness, as they say, with it, but inflation is in a much better situation than when they started this tightening cycle. So the good news is it looks like they're probably going to be game for at least a 3/4 point rate cut next year in the federal funds rate, which has implications for mortgages and so forth for the average viewer.
You mentioned implications for mortgages. So if someone is looking to make a big purchase here in the coming months, house, car, what would be your advice to them?
Well, in general, the same things that you and I always talk about: prudence. No matter what's going on macroeconomically, you have to do what's right for you and your family's budget, and that's always going to be the case. But obviously, for those that have maybe been on the sidelines, I think this comes as a pretty strong indicator of hope, in that mortgage rates have come down. We see the 15-year now in the mid fives. The 15-year fixed mortgage rate is in the mid fives, and we see the 30-year fixed moving into the sixes, even to the mid sixes. So this is really good news for those that are maybe been on the sidelines looking to buy a home, or those on the sidelines looking to buy a car. So just be prudent is my general advice, like always, but this would be directionally a good sign for those that are looking to buy homes.
You always have a great analogy saying that the Fed Reserve is like the firefighters trying to put out the fire. So I've got to ask, where's the fire at right now?
Well, I think the fire has been pretty well put out, Justin. I'll continue to maintain philosophically that our Congress still needs to get their house in order, and this is a nonpartisan comment, because we can't continue to spend more than we take in, or else we pour fuel on that fire and make it come raging back potentially. So that's a good thing to keep in mind for the next election cycle that's coming up for the average viewer. But the Federal Reserve has, in my view, done its job. They might have been a little bit late to the fire to put it out in terms of starting the rate hikes, maybe a little bit too late. But I think they're not going to declare victory. Powell he came off fairly humble yesterday, in my view. He did not declare full victory, but I think he did a great job, he and his team overall, in putting the fire out. Now, that said, the one caution I might have is there are lagged effects with rate hikes. That's always been the case, always will be the case with rate hikes or with rate cuts. And so there could be damage caused by those rate hikes. That was always when we're trying to achieve this quote soft landing for the average viewer. That means we wanted to be able to raise rates aggressively to address inflation without breaking the economy. But the American economy is strong. Americans are resilient. And very few thought that Powell and company could achieve this soft landing, but it looks like it may very well happen. That these rate hikes won't have lagged effects that actually break the economy next year. So we'll keep an eye on that. But right now, everything's looking up. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful here.
All right. And we'll hold on to that hope. Dr. Sandiford, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Justin.